Want to achieve network marketing success? Then you're in the right company. Hello, and welcome to Leave Nothing to Chance, hosted by networking marketing giant John Solleder. Learn everything you need to know about the network marketing space from somebody who's actually done it. Join us every week for front row seats as we feature some of the finest and most successful personalities in network marketing. Leave nothing to chance. Join us now.
Well, this is going to be fun today. It is December 6th, 2021. It's hard to believe a few short weeks we will be in 2022. So I want to welcome my two esteemed colleagues, friends. One happens to be not only a friend, but actually happens to be my sister as well. But she's not on here because of that. She's on here because of her communication skills, which is what we're going to be talking about today, which are vast. So let me introduce Keith Hooper and Dr. Nancie Celini. Welcome both of you to the Leaving Nothing to Chance.com podcast. How are you both?
I'm well, John. Thanks for having me. Nice to see you.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me, and thanks for including me with your much smarter sister on this call today, John. As well, you know.
I listen. I invited her based on merit, not based on bloodline, because some of our bloodline, I don't think you'd want to interview, and frankly, I don't think they'd have much to say. They'd have a lot to say, but you might not understand them.
Well, I'm just honored to be here, knowing her background and all the stuff that she's accomplished in life, and great information. And the best way to succeed in life is help other people, and she's just been somebody that's done a tremendous job with that.
Thank you, Keith. Back at you.
Well, before we get into kind of the topic, which is the art of communication, which unfortunately I feel is being lost with all the social media that exists today. And I'm a social media fan. I use it in my business. And certainly, being a podcaster, I use it every week. But I think it's somewhat been lost. And I think back to some of the great communicators. And I was looking online this morning, and so many people come to mind, but I'll mention a few, and there's more than this, obviously. But according to the internet anyway, the 10 greatest communicators of the modern era would be John Wooden, who was basketball coach, of course, at UCLA for many years, Sir Winston Churchill, hopefully don't have to tell too many people who Churchill was, Dr. Billy Graham, President Reagan, Jack Welch from the business world, Dr. Martin Luther King, certainly don't think I need to tell anybody who he is or was. Walter Cronkite. To me, when news was actually news, Walter Cronkite was the guy I would listen to when I was a kid. Grew up listening to Walter Cronkite. Benjamin Netanyahu, the former prime minister of Israel. I had the privilege of living in Israel many, many years ago when he was prime minister the first time. And great speaker, very, very brilliant man. Whether you agree or disagree with his politics, you'll love to listen to him speak because he had such command of communication skills. And we could go on. Oprah Winfrey certainly would be on that list. And there's many others. But when I think about those great communicators, they had some commonalities. And I think one of those commonalities was that you knew what they were saying. They were very clear. Whether you agreed or disagreed with what they were saying, perhaps if they were in politics and you did or didn't like what they were saying, but at least you understood what they were saying. Now, how is that relevant for us in network marketing? There's an old saying, what you're not up on, you're down on. If people don't understand what it is you're trying to communicate, no matter how well you think you're communicating it, no matter how many books you've read, no matter how much information, no matter how much detail, if you are not clear in your message and concise in your message, you'll lose the person's interest. They'll mentally turn off. They might be polite, but you're not going to earn their business. And that goes not only in network marketing, but that goes in the corporate world. That goes probably in ministry. It probably goes in every other thing where you need to communicate, which, by the way, is every business. Keith and I were talking earlier. How come in every business there's dominant players? I think back to my days in New Jersey, and Nancie probably remembers a guy I used to hang out with. His name was Richie. And Richie was one of the most successful lawnmower and snowblower dealers in the entire United States. How come he was super successful? Other guys with the same brand struggled. Well, he was a very good communicator. Not only did he know his brand well, but he knew people well. I think of the life insurance business that I was privileged to spend a couple of years in. And I got exposed to a gentleman by the name of Joe Gandolfo, And I don't know if Joe's still alive or not, but Joe is a living, or was a legend in life. Is a legend in life insurance business. So much for good communication, right? And I don't know whether Joe's still alive or not, but Joe was the first person in history to sell $1 billion of life insurance in 1 year. $1 billion. Think about that, $1 billion. And he did that, by the way, many years ago. So, the premiums are much lower. And I think of a book that Joe wrote that is somewhere in the shelves behind me, or the many boxes of books that I own. And it was selling is 98% understanding human beings and 2% product knowledge. 98% understanding human beings. What is that really saying? Understanding human beings and what their needs and their wants are, and then communicating to them how you can help them achieve those things. So there's many, many other examples, but hey, I don't want to dominate the call. Dr. Celini, why don't we start with you? Just share a little bit. Of course, I know a lot of your background, but even as my sister, I know you've been in the corporate world, in the technology sector, and today you're in the medical world. So you really have at least 2 careers, plus being a mom and many other things. But share a little bit, if you will, of your background and some of the companies maybe that you've presented and worked with over these many years.
Thank you, John, and thanks for that nice intro. I think my career has been rather eclectic, I may say, in that I did start in technology. I started very young. I had a ringside seat to the computer revolution as we know it today. And I think a lot of that was very foundational for me, because I got to work with people. And you described that list of, the top 10. I'm going to tell you, I got to see people in action who were not on any top 10 list, but they were brilliant when it came to communicating their ideas. Unfortunately, I worked for a company who could not communicate its ideas. So when we think about computer technology today, and it's an interesting introduction and avenue to come into the writing and communication topic that you really want to talk about today. When we talk about computer revolution, few people, unless they really know the history, think of Xerox Palo Alto Research Laboratories, unless you've watched Triumph of the Nerds. And I think this is a classic case of why words matter. And that whole description you just laid out about someone being really articulate in conveying what they're selling and being a huge success as a result of it. Xerox was a Wall Street Journal article I'll never forget, too much, too little, too late was the tagline that described their contributions. And it's really sad to me, because technologically, I think few companies contributed as much as they did, bringing us the graphic user interface, giving us the mouse by observing pre-verbal children. They contributed to this widely, and yet why did they not become the household name? So when we think of computer technology today, and who really put it on the map, people like Bill Gates come to mind. And there were many others before Bill Gates, but I think it's central to this idea, John, not only of how I started in my career, but also to get us to the topic and very close up and personal with it, of why being able to express what you're doing in simple terms so that others can identify with what you're doing and say, yes, I need that, is critical. And not every company has been masterful at it. And I think some companies who are really very high tech and have contributed, to the tech base on how we have this brilliant array of technology today, I think some of them maybe were happy with kind of having that little bit of a backseat. But I don't think anyone could refute Mr. Gates's stellar success, can we say? So what was the difference? Well, the difference was that I think in one case you had a group of very brilliant engineers who were attempting to design something that they didn't even understand what it was going to do. And these inventions led to the internet as we all know it today. When I first walked into my first green screen room at the DARPA office that I was assigned to, because I had a government assignment for quite a long time, and I saw this green screen, and this very lovely scientist from DARPA explained to me that this was a communication system to keep in touch with all the military bases, but they thought it had a lot of application beyond that. You know, who knew? It was the beginning of the internet as we know it today. So what's the difference between all these brilliant inventions and being able to become a household name? And I think you've coined it, and I've watched it from the tech perspective, sitting on those sidelines. It is the ability to communicate what it is you are selling. And whether you're directly selling or you're indirectly selling, look, every one of us is trying to make a case for why what we're doing is important. Why does it warrant someone's attention? From my really technical days in system engineering, I was assigned, as I said, by the mothership Xerox at the time to what was called a GEM assignment. And I thought, wow, that's cool. GEM, that's a precious thing. Well, it stood for government, education, and medical. So long story short, it was a sweet assignment. I didn't realize it at the time. I was so young. I didn't have the context. I had people tell me that not keeping my laboratory job at the time with international playtex was a mistake because this computer field was unproven and it probably wasn't going to go very far. I actually had people say that to me. Can you imagine? Fortunately, I did not listen. So from there, I got into supporting government sites, including DARPA, as I already laid out. I worked on live munition bases. It was really a very fascinating time because I got to see how the technology was being applied. I worked in the education sector. I worked with the School for the Deaf in New Jersey and the School for the Blind, who were looking at ways that technology could assist those who were hearing or visually impaired. Both tremendous industries. Like, how did I know the value of that context? But the one that really struck me, that called to me, was my medical sector. And that meant that I had all of the, at the time, pharmaceutical medical device companies all up and down the New Jersey corridor. And few people, unless you live here or worked within it, know that at one time, New Jersey was the pharma capital of the American world. That's changed since. And from there, I got into this very different kind of world. You know, it was about drug development. It was about clinical research. It was about working with patient populations. And because I want to say the industry at that point was really at its tipping point. There was a lot of change going on. From there, I decided to devote myself to the healthcare field. It really called to me the importance of the research that was taking place and the background that I had. So I entered technically. I would then go on to earn my degrees in public health, because at the end of the day, still today, I consider myself very much a health technologist who has a deep passion for how we keep populations, or maybe help populations, to get healthier, to get stronger. And as you know, John, a lot of our work with you and Keith and our other colleagues has really been focused around that. So that is how I got here today. And what I do today in the biopharmaceutical sector, which has changed dramatically. We've seen companies come and go, larger companies buy smaller companies. And I don't think there's anyone who can refute the speed of research now and the agility that some of these companies have developed in the research field. Very different than we had to wait 15 years, you know, to see a product or a drug that might be assistive to helping people get healthier. So those timelines are getting shorter. And what I do today is something called organizational change management, which is why I have that background there. Think OCM. That's my motto. When I'm talking to people, I want them to think about change. And I want them to think about change, not in the kind of household way it's become, because I don't care where you look or what you read right now. Everybody's saying, oh, we're in a time of change. I think we all agree on that, given the events of these past 18 months, 2 years. But change from a very deep level has to have more meaning. And that is my job, to convey to people, why are we making this change in technology, in process, in structure? And it's a hard profession, I won't lie to you, but it's all about communication and taking complex ideas and boiling them down into things that people can get excited about.
Well, along those lines, I love that acronym, first of all. And I think acronyms today, okay, like organizational change management, right? That's a mouthful, right? A lot of words, a lot of big words, right? But it represents something. And I think the acronyms are something today that people communicate with, maybe because of memes. I don't know. Maybe the younger generation, maybe it's because they're growing up with memes. But let me go to Keith for a minute. Keith, share, if you will, a little bit of your multi-faceted career on your end too, because both of you are fascinating people, and for our audience's benefit, leading up to some of the skills that you're going to get off of this call about communication, you'll understand both of these individuals, they're not network marketing people, okay? They both dabble in network marketing and both make a little income in network marketing, but they both have had big careers doing other things. So Keith, share a little bit, if you will, about your family and your origin and anything you want to share on a personal level.
You know, John, that today's call is about communication, and I'm thinking about it, you know, what are we talking about? Why is that so important? Because if you want to succeed in life, you better be able to communicate, number one, with your spouse. And number two, you better be able to communicate with your children, and you better be able to communicate with your grandchildren. Okay. And there's communication skills, and, you know, we don't think about that, but that's learned. Okay, we look, you know, today, the art of the communication. Well, the beautiful thing about communication is it's learned. Right when in between my junior and senior year in college, okay, well, I was working for my father and uncle, okay, and we're farmers. Background is agriculture, okay, and they said, okay, oh, by the way, you're enrolled in the Dale Carnegie class in Fresno, okay, and so I'm 19 years old. I'm in this class in Fresno, the Dale Carnegie class. There isn't a person in the room that's under the age of 40, except me. Okay, everybody else is over the age of 40. How to win friends and influence people. Okay, well, we're in the farming business. Okay, why would my father and uncle want to get me to go to a Dale Carnegie How to Win Friends and Influence People? Okay, because it's communication in everything you do, whether you're communicating with your employees, whether you're communicating with people you're either buying land from or renting land from, whether you're selling crops or buying crops, which we were doing, we were buying from other people, or whether you're communicating with your bankers, okay, you better have those communication skills. So they sent me to that class when I'm 19 years old, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and I'm a farmer. Everybody else is in there trying to be salespeople, okay? I'm some farm kid. Okay, 19 years old. So we're there and we're through that process. So when we think about this communication skills, it doesn't matter if you're high tech or low tech, okay? You better learn how to communicate with your children, your grandchildren, your family, whatever. From that, John, you know, we're talking about, Nancie's talking about Dr. Celini, okay, our good friend, talking about this high tech people. Well, in the very early 80s, the late 70s, early 80s, I had the pleasure of attending a function. And there was a gentleman there by the name of Russell Giffen. No one on the call, no one listening today will know that name, but Russell Giffen was the world's largest irrigated farm owner in the world. Okay, I had never met the man, never seen the man, but he spoke at this event of about 700 or 800 farmers. He's the man, when you walk in and you see the little deal that says Cotton Incorporated, the little cotton ball on all the sheets and all the stuff. Russell Giffen was the one that created that. Russell Giffen's communication skills, he would have been hugely successful if he had owned a shoe store, because he could communicate and command attention. It was interesting watching other people. The people from Cotton Incorporated couldn't get close enough to this guy. The Wall Street people that were there were hanging on every word that this man was communicating. So when we're talking about this communication skills, the good thing about this communication is it's a skill. You can learn it. We were talking about McKay's book, How to Win, How to Swim with the Sharks. Okay, that was about being able to communicate. So it doesn't matter if you're high tech, low tech, doesn't matter. What's the difference? I've got a friend of mine. I've got a gardener that comes and takes care of my yard, and he's got his little truck, and he's got a couple of people that work for him. I've got another friend of mine that's down in Southern California that has 1,000 people that work for him, and he's in the gardening business. He airlifts, plants into people's backyards with helicopters. Oh, by the way, the helicopters belong to him. Okay. And he's a gardener, but he's in the gardening business. So, but he's a great communicator. Okay. So the communication skills are going to go throughout all of your life. But most of the time people say, well, I know how to talk. We're not talking about talking. Catch that. We're not talking about talking. We're talking about communicating. And it's a skill that you can learn. And that's the best part about what Leaving Nothing to Chance is about, is being able to acquire these skills so that you can be successful with it. Because if it's an art, only a handful of people can do it, John. So that, once again, doesn't matter if you're in the gardening business, doesn't matter if you're a doctor, doesn't matter if you're in the computer business, doesn't matter if you're trying to do it on social media. You better look at your communication skills. You better go back and look at that. And when you look at somebody and they go, I don't know what you mean, that's not on them. That's on you, because you didn't communicate your thoughts to them in such a way that they could accept it. So look at that, evaluate it, and invest in yourself in some great communication tools.
Well, along those lines, King Solomon, going back in time, before the internet, right? For our young people listening, there was a time when the internet did not exist. Nancie and Keith and I all remember those days. And we lived, right? Yeah, when we probably had better lives because we didn't have the internet constantly. But all that said, okay, King Solomon said, and I may have the quote wrong here, but it's I'll paraphrase what he said: accurate communication allows progress. Well, if you think about when Solomon lived thousands of years ago, then accurate communication allowed progress, but you didn't have telephones, you didn't have newspapers, you didn't have the internet, you didn't have television, right? You had, you told something to maybe a small group of people, and they had to carry that message to the next town or city and communicate that to the people there. Okay, so communication's always been at the very top of most human beings' list of priorities, and yet many of us don't do it well. And that's the purpose of today's call. I wrote something else down too: to communicate, to dominate, communicate. That's my new acronym for today: to dominate, communicate. And along those lines, Nancie, I want to go back to you because you've been in front of people internationally. You've done business, I know, in Japan, as well as in European countries, where your audience is not necessarily listening to you in their native tongue. So you've got to communicate that much better when you're being translated. And I've been in a situation, so has Keith with our business, but you've been in places where, you might know 3 words of the language and you can't even fake it well, right? Where you have to really communicate. How do you take a foreign audience, Japanese, for example, okay, and make your point so that that guy or gal or that executive in that company knows exactly what it is that your company is trying to communicate with them?
It's such a great question, John. And I think it's one we don't talk about enough. Because I teach a class on cultural awareness. We call it a cultural tune-up for people who are new. And I see the deer in the headlights look from all of them the first time that they have to go to Japan. For anyone who's been in Tokyo, very little's in English. And the native tongue there is not English, to your point. So a couple of rules of the road here. Our colleagues in Japan are some of the hardest working people that I have ever known on the planet. They love humor. They love being human beings. And I've seen a lot of really nervous professionals go in front of them, with the 400 slides, because they do like details and they do like data. But the thing that works the best, John, for me, and again, that's such a good question, is to speak clearly, no acronyms, no terms that we would use here in the United States that have meaning for us. Even when you're trying to be humorous, if it's a US thing, they're probably not going to find it humorous. You've got to try to link your humor more to a very simplistic type of just being, making a mistake and saying, oh, I'm sorry, being human is one of the most important things. And for cultures and organizations and audiences that do not speak English as a first language, I just must say, they all put us to shame as Americans. And I'm going to put that out there. I know fewer Americans are multilingual by large numbers than I do in my foreign colleagues. Oftentimes, they do speak English. But when you understand, and I actually went through this with a linguist so that I could understand, because I worked with not only in Japan, but in Thailand and in India, it's so important to understand the brain activity that they're using to listen to you in English and convert it into their native language. It's amazing when you meet someone who's trilingual and beyond that. So I always try to give credit to knowing that they do understand a lot more than we give them credit for, but talking slowly, using pictures, and pausing, saying, does that idea make sense? Now, if you know Japan in particular, they also are extremely respectful. So nobody's going to shout out like our American audiences do. But if you give them the opportunity to interact, they A, really respect you for it, and B, it works. And I've been working with companies in Japan in particular for the better part of 25 years. And I remember the first time having a whole room full of Japanese businessmen primarily, and the interpreters were there and going, oh my. And because I'm not a linguist and I don't know Japanese, I had to resort to the only thing I knew, which was sticking to why I was there and what my purpose was for my presentation. And I just kept going back to that. And that also is something that I see a lot of speakers in the spoken word, even in English speaking audiences, no language barriers, they lose their way. So learning how to be clear, learning how to be concise. I was taught, and some of you will remember this, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. Mm-hmm. It sounds silly, but John, I'm here today to tell you about a revolutionary product. I'm going to take you through some data points. I want to show you how people are using this and responding. And then at the end of this presentation, we're going to have a discussion. I'm happy to answer your questions. Good? Okay. You go through your points. And then at the end, I say, John, I just told you about our product. I showed you some real world examples. What do you think? And if you follow Jack Welch, he wrote one of the most brilliant things. It stuck with me all these years. It was in a book written by a man named Trout. And he was writing about the downfall of companies who became too complicated. And one of the companies he cited was Volkswagen. When Volkswagen went beyond the Beetle and started, do you remember all those other cars they had? They plummeted. And he's talking about other companies as well. Jack Welch, inherited a mess when he took over and had to sort that out. So when the author interviewed him about, what makes you respond to somebody coming through the door and telling you about a newfangled idea. And I'll paraphrase, but he spoke about nervous people who are insecure tend to bring in massive amounts of slides with massive amounts of words. And in the end of it, he says, the most powerful communicators, the most successful people are those who are unafraid to be simple. And I've never forgotten that.
It brings to mind on my end, I won't name the company because I don't know how much of this they want out, but there was a company, not in our industry, but the people who sold it were here in Texas. And they sold the company to Warren Buffett. When Warren was really running his everything still, which I don't know if he is or isn't anymore, but he's close to 90, so I assume he's not. But the one company that wanted to buy this company came in with like 100-page proposal and all sorts of different, tax breaks and this and that. And it's a very complex deal. And the people who started the company were pretty basic people. Even though they were really successful, they were making a product that's a very basic product, and they were basic people. Buffett and his guys came in with 2 paragraphs, said, here's what we'll buy the company for. Here's when we'll buy the company. How would you like us to pay? And they said they looked at the 2 deals, and the one might have been a better deal, but it was so complex that they walked away from it and they took Buffett's deal. And it's still a very successful company in this part of the country. And it's a company that makes a product for home use. Anyway, so let's stay on that subject for a minute. Keith, let me go.
Yeah, if I could, John. I mean, I'm listening to Nancie, and she's talking about Japan. Okay, well, our little communications part that we did, we became the largest exporter of alfalfa in the world to Japan. And every month, 12 months out of the year, there were busloads of Japanese dairy farmers coming to our operation here in California. And what was interesting, none of us spoke a word of Japanese. Okay, so the tour buses would come, and they would come over on their stuff, and they were coming for this specific deal to come to our operation. But what was so interesting with this was 2 things. The communication that mattered was all nonverbal. It was all nonverbal. It was all the smiles, the handshakes, the appreciation of that, okay, and understanding what was important to them, okay, and that appreciation. What we had one of our general manager that we had for that particular business was a jolly boy, okay, what I refer to as he was a couple of years older than I am, and a really jolly guy, okay, didn't speak a word of Japanese at all, but every year he went to Japan for 2 weeks, okay, and I'm surprised he didn't starve to death because he didn't know enough Japanese to even order. But he was a person that appreciated them, that nonverbal communication that came across between that. We became literally the largest exporter of alfalfa in the world to Japan because of that communication skills. Okay. And it was interesting because, some of our competitors, we actually bought the product from them and turned around and ran it through our marketing mechanism and shipped it to Japan, but the Japanese wouldn't buy from them because they didn't like the way they communicated with them. So there's a lot of this communication skill that's nonverbal, and people say, well, the nonverbal part doesn't matter anymore because, we're doing it through texting and Facebook and whatever. The nonverbal comes through in everything you do, including everything you type in an email that comes through. And I like Nancie to pick that up. Even when you're typing a message in an email and sending it to that, there's an underlying nonverbal communication that's coming through. And if you're not aware of it, it very well can stomp you into the ground. Okay, it's not taking advantage of that, right, Nancie?
Absolutely, Keith. And that is because I know, John, you probably want to get into some practical side of, where are we and what are we going to do about it? But Keith just hit my nerve. Being a professor at a medical school, teaching topics that are highly technical with students who do not believe they ever have to write a single thing. Very interesting to deal with the generational differences in, I don't have to write anymore. I text everything. I'm heads down. I don't have to make eye contact. Young doctors have to be trained now how to really talk to people, how to look them in the eye. There's nothing more, I think, disrespectful. And Keith, no wonder that gentleman who was mastered the art of the nonverbal with our Japanese colleagues, I said, they are the most respectful people on the planet. If you show respect and you show an effort, they appreciate it. But, what do you do when you're facing a room full of burnt out medical students who are sitting there like this at night and they're on their phones? They're texting to get pizza later on. They're not all texting, or they're texting for their exam grades. They're far more important to them. And then I would tell them, like, okay, so your mathematical skills in health economics in some cases were brilliant, no problem. But explain to me how you came up with that. And I want you to do it in a paragraph. They thought I was torturing them. And in ways I am, because I know what Keith just said is so important. Doesn't matter who you are, where you are, how smart you are. One day, you are going to be held accountable for your words. That may be in a text, maybe in an email, may be completely nonverbal. Somewhere, someone's gonna catch you on it. And boy, it's embarrassing, right? I think we can all cite some examples of that for people who thought they never have to humble themselves to be a human being. We all this technology, and I am a technologist, so you have to know this is from my heart and soul. A little hard to say, having grown up with this stuff. In some ways, it has set our society today back in intelligence, in the ability to want to search and read a book versus sit on their phone all day long. And, the family dinners now with everyone around the table texting each other. I think that's sad. I think it's tragic. Because the art of being able to say to someone, hey, Keith, tell me about your background. Tell me what that was like. There's nothing that can replace the art of, and I'm glad Keith brought it out because he talked about face-to-face communication, nonverbal communication, and now we hit the topic of how are your writing skills and what are you writing? Where are you writing? And are you thinking when you're writing? Because I think the thought process has just gone out the window.
Well, so Nancie, let me ask you, you agree with this? Never write an email when you're mad.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, Keith. Or tired, or been drinking.
Are drinking, or over exuberant, over happy. Okay. Either one of those, think about it. And so often today we're in that instant communication, which means instant train wrecks. We're not even talking about car wrecks. We're talking about train wrecks occur because people don't think about that. Put a mirror up in front of you. Okay. With these communications, put a mirror. So when you're typing that text out or you're typing that email, you look in that mirror, make sure there's a smile on your face. All these things that are nonverbal, you go, well, that can't possibly matter. Well, the difference between our success in business was a smile on our face and how we thought and how we communicated to our customers when we were selling alfalfa to them, to the people we were buying alfalfa from, the processing people, the guys that were working for me in the trucking company to be able to haul the stuff to the port, all that communication stuff. And, it happens so quickly that if you don't train yourself to it, it really can cause a major problem. And in today, all you've done is shorten that danger area has gotten much bigger because of instant communication. Something happens, it sets you in a position where you want to respond to it in the moment. And that's not a good idea. Think about it, get in front of that mirror and say, talk to that person on the other side. Self, is this something that I really should be doing?
And yet, Keith, I just want to interject here. no matter how many times we tell people that the words you write now in a fit of anger, frustration, maybe being just you, you're at home, and you're in a work situation, they are indelible now. And companies, when they go through legal discovery, still are being sunk with huge fines when they find people writing about things in email and on websites and in instant chat and instant messaging, which is so prevalent these days. That's the stuff that sinks companies. So it's not what you tell me that you said, it's what you didn't tell me that your employees were saying. And we continue to see it. I think it's gotten better, but I think email, text messaging is a little bit like that angry driver on the highway who flies by you and gives you the what salute. You think you're never going to see that person again till you pull in the rest stop and they're the cashier behind the counter and they go, oh, I know you. We have to really start to value that our words, how we present ourselves. And there's a very incriminating video just came out recently about someone caught, you can't undo these things. And it's a politician. And I know we're not going to talk politics, but I'll pick on them because they think they're not going to get caught saying these horrific things. Yeah, you will get caught and the whole world will see it. So now what? Are you proud of that? Your written word is a representation of who you really are. And that's what we have to remember. And Keith, thank you for bringing that up about stopping.
Nancie, I think because once again, we're talking about becoming successful today, communicating in order to build your business, to succeed in life, and that communication skills, whether you're the gardener, whether you're the guy driving the garbage truck or the guy that owns the garbage company. John and I know a lady in the Northeast that is extremely successful, okay, who owns a garbage company, okay, got a lot of garbage trucks out picking up stuff, but the communications. But I think when we look at this, understanding that your communication is going to determine your success in life, your ability to communicate, and learning the skills to be able to do it effectively. And that's what I think is good with what John has here with Leaving Nothing to Chance, is developing those skills. So John, we're going to go ahead and let you re-engage in your program.
I was going to go have lunch just let you guys finish because this is great. This is great. And this is what
good topic.
Let me make 3 points from everything you guys just talked about in no particular order. Russell Crowe talking about road rage, okay, because it's a serious problem. I had a guy cut me off last week and give me the finger. He cut me off. I'm thinking, why are you? Anyway, but Russell Crowe made a movie called Unhinged that I actually watched last night, and it's about road rage and how serious this can get. And he's a great actor, by the way. You don't know, to Nancie's point. You pull in the gas station, the guy's behind you. Okay. Or worse yet, Nancie and I have a sister that gave our uncle the bird one time. He was beeping at her to say hello in traffic at a stop sign. And you remember that? That's a long time ago. But anyway,
I do.
But you never know. It could be your pastor behind you. It could be your priest, could be your accountant, could be your lawyer, could be your mother. Who knows? Anyway, next point about smiling. Starbucks. Think about Starbucks. Now, I do not drink coffee. I have not drank coffee in 30 some odd years, don't even like coffee. But I will go in Starbucks occasionally if I am having a crummy day and I'll have a hot chocolate or a bottle of water, or I'll go in it because Howard Schultz, the great CEO and founder of that company, actually wasn't the founder. He bought the company and developed it. But anyway, great CEO, Howard Schultz. They have a policy. They only hire friendly people. They only hire people who know how to smile. Because if you're having a crummy day, last thing you want is the person who's selling you a cup of coffee to have a crummier day and reflect that. You get that smile and maybe whatever it is forgotten. He took that concept, by the way, from El Giornale, I think it's called, over in Italy, which is the little bistros that they have all around Italy when you walk around, where you go in and it's raining and you read the newspaper, you listen to a little opera, you have a cup of coffee and you go back to your life. great concept, and it's worked here in the States and throughout the world. But that smiling is the real key. And then the other point is, we're talking about the Japanese. The Japanese understand nonverbal communication so well, because think about it. They took a product that they developed, cold, wet, dead fish wrapped in rice. And they came up with a name. It's called sushi. And even though I no longer eat sushi on a personal level, sushi is all around the world. They took a concept of basically something that you would otherwise probably find disgusting, and they turned it into a brand that is in every country probably in the world that you can buy, and expensive and a premium product. So they understand that communication. So let's stay on that topic. Let's stay on it this way, guys. How to take something technical and make it simple. And let me give you a couple of examples that come to mind in my brain. Henry Ford, way back, took the idea of the assembly line, and he took, all of these different car parts and moving parts, and he created an assembly line system that creates, has evolved today in just about every industry in manufacturing. But he also had a concept that he wanted the men who at that time worked for Ford to be able to afford the product that they were making, that they didn't want to be a premium product, okay? That was taking a very technical problem, and he simplified first the economy of scale to create the product, and then the ability for people that would make a living wage to actually be able to afford that product. When you think of the computer, right? What evolved, I remember when I worked for Metropolitan Life back in the early 80s, Nancie probably remembers this, our late good friend Nick Donato I worked for. Great man, great mentor of mine. Anyway, but I remember when I worked for Nick that we had a huge Honeywell computer, and I had to go to somebody's house and accumulate all of this data, their stocks, their bonds, their mutual funds, their mortgage, their retirement account, whatever they had. And I would have to take all that data, let's say on a Monday night, and take it back to my office and run it through that big, huge Honeywell computer system. And it would give me documents that I then maybe on Tuesday night or Wednesday night went back and saw that couple and went through all that data with them. Okay, it was a two-step process. Today, insurance agents, they have their cell phone. They can do it right off of this, right? They took all that data. These little things today, you could actually launch the space shuttle. There's more technology in your telephone, right, than there was at NASA way back when we were doing the Apollo project. Not that many years ago. We were, three of us were certainly alive. We certainly watched all of that happen. So along those lines, those are two examples, and there's thousands of them. But how do you take that and you take it so that the average person, well, let me give you one other example. There's language in everything. I know my sister here talks to doctors, and we work with doctors in one project that she and I are involved with, and they're very, very technical people, and they have their own language, right? It's multisyllabic, and you and I as lay people, we have no idea what they're talking about, right? They have their own language. Many years ago, I was at the then Crystal Cathedral Church in California, and I wanted to hear Dr. Robert Schuller speak. And unfortunately, he was off that weekend, but his son, who eventually would take over his ministry, was preaching. And I'll never forget, the sermon was about the fact that he's a big fisherman. And that when he's with other fishermen and they're talking about bobbers and sinkers and that sort of thing, they have their own language. Well, we all have our own language that resonates with us. Okay, whatever it is that you're into. Okay, if you're a gardener and you're speaking to other gardeners, you have a language. If you're a golfer, you have your own language. If you're if I was involved in the sport of judo for many years, if I'm around other judoka, we use terminology that we understand, and the person at the next table has no idea what we're talking about. And that goes with every subject out there. So whatever it is, some of us are really, really smart, right? Keith described somebody before in a business with owning garbage trucks, okay? Pretty basic business for the most part. A lot of intricacies when you're in it, I'm sure. But on the surface, a very simple business. I described my friend Richard, who sells snowblowers and lawnmowers, sells more than anybody in the United States, to his little store. Okay. How do you get really good at what you do is through communication. But to the person who walks in who's not a fisherman or not a professional landscaper or not a whatever, how do you take all of that knowledge and not overwhelm the person so that they're so overwhelmed and confused that they say, wow, Nancie, Keith, this sounds great, but man, I don't understand a thing you just said, and therefore I'm not buying it. Now that's nonverbal communication because they're not going to admit that. They're not going to admit that. But I have to tell you, this guy here, you don't get my money if I don't understand what you're talking about. If you're not really clear and concise, I don't care whether I'm buying an automobile, an insurance policy, an investment, a computer, a television, whatever it happens to be, if I don't get it, you're not getting my hard-earned money, plain and simple. Okay, so Nancie, let's go back to you because you're in that world constantly of really technical stuff, but how do you take it for the person who has to maybe make the decision? Maybe they're the owner of the company and they employ engineers or doctors or people with a certain expertise in a certain area. But the guy or the gal that has to make the decision that says, okay, my people want it, but I don't understand. How do you simplify that so that that man, that woman, that couple gets it?
Yeah, and I'm so glad you're letting us talk about what I call the tactical practical, right? How do you do this? And that's a great aspect of it, John. There's probably a million other questions the three of us could come up with, but that's a good starting one. I will tell you that honestly, there are some people who are so technically wired that may be an impossible feat for them. And that's when it's important to, the expression, take someone's hands off the steering wheel and say, all right, a couple of things that I find work really well. You go to the subject matter expert, and in my field, you just describe my day job. Everything we're writing about, everything we're trying to get people to be excited about is in multi ways extremely technical. So I go to the subject matter expert and I say, explain this to me like I'm a 2-year-old. Very famous line from a movie, right? Explain this to me as if I am just a person on the street. And generally I can pull out of that subject matter expert the keywords, right? And then I feed it back to them because it may not be something that I understand technically either as well as they do. So that's one technique. When it comes to a topic, though, that I do understand intricately well, and this is what I encourage everybody to do, your writing time alone with your computer, or maybe I still write. This is the other aspect. We probably won't have time, but the art of sitting down and writing. And I just got a whole bunch of these beautiful postcards I am sending out to people because we don't write enough. And that physical, mental part of writing is really imperative here, because you can take a very technical concept and just say, I'm just going to write about it as if I were talking to my friend about it. Write as much as you want to. Don't edit. The words are free. You can write as many as you want. Once you've gotten all your ideas kind of thrown out there, it's what I call the wild jungle of words. Then it's time to go in and start to prune, right? And generally, if you've done a good enough job of really thinking about the topic, and good writing takes thought. I'm sorry to say, but this is the investment part. You generally can even go back in your own writing and go, oh, that's interesting. I said the word patient adherence 5 times. Maybe this piece is really about what this technology is going to do for our patient. So instead of writing about all the technical sides of it, right, I look for the benefit, because I think we can get lost in many, many details, too many details, but we can all get excited about the benefits. And I'll toss out some examples to you. Because I deal with high tech, the techies in my world always want to write about the technology. But often it's not the technology that's the change they're seeking. The change they're seeking has nothing to do. Who cares whether it's this technology or that technology? Does it get you to the outcome? That's important. So through all that technical mumbo jumbo, if you can boil it down into the benefit, and instead of saying, we're implementing this technology that has all this kind of capability and it's going to be redundant and we have cloud and we have blah, 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 we're bringing in a new system that's going to be helping us be more responsive to our patients with cancer when they have a question. You hear the difference?
Mm-hmm.
Who wouldn't want to go with that second one? We're going to do something good for our patients. So it's a process, John. And again, I think being honest, because some people are just very, very technically wired. They just are. Getting them out of their own way requires that they go to a writing course. Keith, you were paid a great homage being sent to Dale Carnegie. That was actually good. You know, and one of you touched on the factoid before that people sometimes are embarrassed. They're embarrassed to say, I don't write well. I don't know how to write. You know, I encourage people to get beyond that. It's okay. We can't be all things to all people. And I think being able to own what you're good at and own what you're not good at are both equally important. So read a lot and then write a lot. That's the only way that you can get good. Keith, you said it. This is a skill. It's a skill and it's an art. The skill can come if you just become a good practitioner of it. Write longhand, write on your computer. I carry this book everywhere with me. And sometimes I just get a thought, you know, and I go, wow, that's a great word. I'm going to use that in my piece. And I write it down. Or if I don't have my notebook and I have my phone, I use the notes on here. And it's, I mean, if you read my notes, you'd probably chuckle and go, these are such random thoughts. Yeah, they are. But they're things that just come to me from being a good reader, also being a good listener. I think part of being able to feed this back in a way that's going to have meaning and understanding who are you writing for. If I'm writing to a group of physicians, yeah, I can be as technical as I need to be, and citations and adhering to the proper format. You know, a journal article is very different than writing a personal report about an experience that I had taking the drug, right? Two are very different. So know your audience, write a lot, get it all out there, create your own word jungle, and then go back and prune. Because somewhere in your thoughts, there are those golden thoughts and golden ideas. So you can trim down from maybe 3 pages of stuff you would never want anyone to read into those 1 or 2 really good, strong paragraphs. So that's my practical. That's what I've had to do with students who are brainiacs. They could tell you every single chemical compound known to man and womankind, but ask them to write a paragraph. Oh, and yet, Keith, you started by saying, doesn't matter who you are, where you are, what you're doing. The art of communication is important, and we only get good at it if we get off our cell phones and we talk, we listen, and we write. So hopefully that explains my process for taking those big technical chunks and putting them down into pieces that have meaning and are clear.
Keith, thoughts on that?
Absolutely, Nancie, because your point with that is that communications, your ability to communicate will determine your success in life. To communication, so often people think it's about talking. The interesting thing about communication, if you think about it, is the person asking the questions controls the conversation. Get really good at asking probing questions. If you're talking to somebody, there was a book, I think, I don't remember who wrote it, but I think the title was something along this line. It doesn't matter what you say, it matters what people hear. Okay. And that's where we're at with these communication skills. So once again, spend some time on leaving nothing to chance, spend some time on this thing and evaluate. I'm a great advocate of whatever that interaction is with somebody. Take a moment afterwards. I don't care if it's a cashier at the grocery store. If it had some little bit of significance, and as you're walking back to your car, think about, what could I do better next time? How could I communicate better next time? Okay. It was an interesting thing about, there was a story, and and it's true. Okay. Because it works in all of our lives. people often wonder, the story was about the guy going through the line at the cafeteria at school. And when he got to the point where they were giving out the desserts, the person handing out the dessert always gave them the bigger slice of whatever the pie or the cake or whatever the dessert was. They always, every day this person got a bigger portion of that than everybody else. And so one day somebody asked this person, well, why do you always get the bigger one? Because I asked. Okay, simple. They asked. It was so simple, but everybody else is going through there wondering why they got it, because they learned the ability to ask. And so often that asking is about communication. And, John, today, hopefully people got some information that they can use but once again, the art of the communication is taking a skill. Then I just want to close on this point. If you become skillful at something, people refer to you as an artist. So think about that. The good news with a skill is it's learnable and it's transferable. So you can transfer that skill set that you've learned regarding listening, the art of asking questions, the art of communication, and you can transfer that to your children, your grandchildren, other people that are important to in your life, because you can transfer that skill and they can become skillful with it. And people will think what an artful person they are when it comes to communications, John.
So let's just wrap up real quick here. A couple of really quick fire questions. Okay. I'm going to tell you my answer, and I'm going to ask Nancie and Keith for theirs. Greatest speech in history to me, Winston Churchill, don't quit. 2 words. Man made thousands of speeches. 2 words. Don't quit. He was in his 80s when he did it. Don't quit to this day. Okay. I can think of a second one that comes to mind. JFK talking about sending a man to the moon and returning him safely to Earth. That was a vision for the future. So those are 2. Keith, what comes to mind?
Don't ask what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. You think about that just speaks to you as a person, but it translates to everything else in life. Mm-hmm. Don't ask what someone can do for you. Ask what you can do for your community. Ask what you can do for your family. Ask what you can do for your loved ones. Okay. Very, very, very powerful, John.
Nancie?
I have a dream.
Okay.
Yep.
So
I get emotional.
So that was.
We've forgotten how to dream. Those words meant so much in the context when that great leader said them, but they have even greater context today. We've forgotten how to dream and how to dream big God-sized dreams. I think that's also part of this whole conversation today. Being a dreamer is a good thing.
well, we could probably go on for hours. I was going to ask you guys, if you want, just as we finish here, any funny stuff that's ever happened giving speeches. So I'll give you my great moment. There's a word in Spanish. It's called años, A-N-O-S, and it has 2 different meanings depending on how you say it. One is a very generic meaning, and the other is a part of the anatomy. And I used it in the wrong place in the speech in Monterrey that I was giving in Spanish. And that was the last speech I gave in Spanish. I learned my lesson. Now, everybody laughed, fortunately, when I said it. But I learned my lesson, basically, not to speak to an international audience in their language if you don't know what you're saying. But funny moment for me. And they still like me down there, I think, anyway. Nancie, you must have had 1 or 2. Come to mind?
I've had so many flub-a-dubs, John. It was funny because the whole room did laugh. I had developed a bad habit of saying, well, quite frankly. And in this presentation, I was asked a question by the head man. And of course, you can guess what his name was. And I came out with, well, quite frankly, Frank. And it just sounded so stupid of me to say it that way. And that began my breaking of my habit, saying, quite frankly, Frank. He was good humored about it. The room fell apart because it was, we were having a very serious discussion. So that's what I mean about being human, and being able to laugh at myself in that moment was very, very important.
Priceless. Keith, I know you've had a few, and if you can't remember, I can tell a few.
Well, that would be your part, as you always would. But I would just say that you're always going to stumble over people's names, okay? And that is the one that will cause you the most difficulty when you're speaking in public. And there's just, it just happens a lot of the times. But, I really just want to close with this thought, folks. Learn to speak, learn to write, take the time. Nancie made a great point about writing, but it's also important to speak. Okay. I'll close with this thought, John. When I was in grammar school and graduated from grammar school, my 8th grade class, Nancie, was 10 people.
Wow.
Okay. My freshman class in high school was 700. So I went from one size school to another. But my parents put me into a speech class. My parents thought they were putting me into a remedial speech class because I couldn't order food in a restaurant. And they put me in a public speaking class. And just learn to do it. It'll make a major difference in your life. And it was quite interesting when Mike Gallagher, when I graduated high school, Mike Gallagher and I were the #1 debate team in Central California. So you can always learn these skills. And I think that's so important. And I think that's the value of what John is bringing here with these podcasts. So John, thank you for having me.
Okay. Well, thank you both. Hey, next week we're going to do the art of listening. So keep listening to these calls throughout December, folks, on Leaving Nothing to Chance. Every Tuesday will be live. And next month, we'll get back to some legendary network marketing people. But these are skills that you want to take into the new year. 2022 is going to be the best year ever for you, but only if you get ready. Preparation's everything. Thank you, Dr. Celini. Thank you, Keith.
Good to see you both. Thanks for having me, John. Take care now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Leave Nothing to Chance. If you want to know more about what it takes to succeed in the network marketing space, join us again next week for another amazing episode. For additional resources and to connect with John Solleder, visit leavingnothingtochance.com. Don't forget to leave a review, and we'll see you next time.